So speaking of that, here's a potential route. So here's the one way that I think, could be a fruitful way of going through this essay. So after the introduction, what I'm going to do is in section one, I'm going to set up the main challenge to this idea that we can be responsible for that we should be held responsible for our beliefs, as the challenge from doxastic and voluntarism. So I'm going to say that as much as we are, it seems like we should be held responsible for our beliefs. I'm going to stay pretty agnostic between the idea of whether this is talking about epistemic responsibility or moral responsibility. For the purpose of this essay, I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to talk about whether there's any kind of responsibility for us for our beliefs. I'm going to say that the core challenge to this claim, which is kind of, again, neutral between this epistemic and moral variance, comes from the idea that our beliefs are kind of automatically generated from the kind of environment around us. So we don't really have any choice over our beliefs, and this threatens to rid us of the responsibility for our beliefs if it's something that can genuinely be shown that we have no control over, if we accept this kind of responsibility principle. And I'm going to point out that if we don't really face responsibility, so if we can't be held responsible for our beliefs, this has some disturbing implications. So it seems like we want to accept that people who hold views that we think are seriously morally incorrect, so Nazis, for example, we want to suggest that we can hold them morally responsible for their beliefs. We should hold them responsible for their beliefs. So this kind of doxastic involuntarist view, I'm going to suggest that this is something that's unintuitive and quite revisionist from our everyday account. So we should look to try and discredit it if we can, and that's what my next section is going to be. So in the next section, I'm going to move on to trying to defend voluntarism. So I'm going to suggest that the bulk of the essay, so this kind of section two, is probably going to be my biggest. I'm going to try and refute the threat of involuntarism. I'm going to give you a kind of whole bunch of arguments to try and suggest to my opponents that they're going to be wrong to suggest that so the involuntarist argument works. So ways I might do that, I'll try to use cases to show that we do have some control over our beliefs. So whether that be the idea that over certain big principles we can have some control, or we can have indirect control, or on the other hand, to deny this other premise where we say that maybe we can have responsibility even without control if we are compatibilists. So if I'm going to kind of list out all these arguments and try and defend them to the best of my ability, and then say that all of these arguments come together to say that it's really hard to defend involuntarism. So the idea that, to defend the argument from involuntarism. So at this point, I'm going to try and reject that argument. So the final portion of my essay is going to be trying to kind of zoom out and add some nuance. So I'm at this point going to have effectively established that we can be held responsible for our beliefs, and we should be held responsible for our beliefs. But I'm going to try and give some more specifics about what that actually is going to look like, and try and argue that there are some forms of holding people responsible for their beliefs that are better than others. So specifically, I'm going to talk about the kind of practical implications of holding people responsible, and arguing that we need to avoid some bad implications if we're going to have a policy of responsibility, which amounts to the kind of policing of beliefs that we talked about in the kind of Mill and Orwell section of the previous lecture. And the worry here is that this could potentially lead to some kind of outcomes of censorship and dogmatism, which we really don't want. So how are we going to suggest that we should hold people responsible for their beliefs while still avoiding these bad consequences? And I'm going to end my essay by arguing that we should try and foster a culture of epistemic virtue, where people are kind of helped in trying to build better habits in their belief formation. So holding people responsible isn't just a matter of kind of going and policing what they do, policing what they believe. Instead, we're going to have a culture of general responsibility where we're kind of affording people the resources and trying to support them in taking responsibility for their own beliefs by providing them with the practice and the habit and the habituation that allows them to become more epistemically virtuous. So the idea is going to be it's not just an individual responsibility, but a communal one as well. So we have the shared responsibility for everybody's beliefs.